which will kick off the show since we really didn't have anything to go with the Seahawks. But yeah, get that spring training. We did it last year. It's a little different this year just because of how scheduling and things go. But here, we're going to make the most out of it and do what we can. So, yeah, just to start off with a quick little recap of spring training. We had something for you here that we did, and we'll throw it to that now.
So, I mean, with this year's Mariners team in spring training, it's interesting regarding spring training because normally this is where position battles are won and lost, right? I mean, there's a few things to look at in that regard. It'll be interesting to see who the backup catcher will be. It'll mainly, be Zevi Zavala. Mitch Garver is here to be the designated hitter, right? It's really only in an emergency situation or some other thing like that where he would catch, as the Mariners want to keep him healthy for the full slate of the season. They want to maximize his hitting power and his hitting ability. Zavala, is more of your traditional catcher. He does well defensively. Outside of that, he's just very average or below average in a lot of regards. The Mariners did acquire Blake Hunt via trade early into the offseason, but I don't really imagine him making it over Zavala. Harry Ford, who we talked to earlier, as you just saw, likely won't make the big league club. It'll be interesting to see where he starts in the minor league system, though. I highly doubt he goes straight back to Everett. I thought he played above his level there in a lot of senses. So it'll be interesting to see where Harry goes. But outside of that, with position battles, I don't see a lot. Emerson Hancock, who has performed well, kind of reaching the velocity of 96 in the most recent spring training game, has talked about wanting to be able to make the starting rotation, to make the big league camp. I just don't see it. I mean, with Bryce Miller adding pitches, Brian Wu having the stuff that he has, and then you've got the top three of Castillo, Gilbert, and Kirby. I don't know where he fits in. I don't imagine the Mariners want to go to a six-man rotation just because they've talked about that. They've done that before, and when it's been ever mentioned since then, Scott Servais has said, don't say that around the starters. I don't imagine we'd go to a six-man rotation. Also, considering the fact with the five-man rotation, everyone's got their unique sort of routines. Logan Gilbert's got his very specific routine that he's got when he prepares for a start. After starts, Luis Castillo will take a jog around the ballpark. I've seen it several times. I've tried to get out of his way. So I just don't imagine the six-man rotation happening, and I don't imagine that they want to put Emerson Hancock in the bullpen either. Or even considering all of that, some folks have talked about just putting Bryce Miller into the bullpen right away. And considering what he's been able to add to his pitching repertoire, I wouldn't put him in there until we see that. So, Hancock's talked about it. I get the excitement. I think he will be an important part of the Mariners' future. I just don't see it happening right now. And outside of that, there really isn't a lot of competition outside of the third base. There was the talk of Luis Urias, who is dealing with that shoulder. It's funny because, the first time we heard about how, he's going to try to work to be good for opening day, at least being able to throw the ball. He showed up, per some reports from Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times, out of shape, out of throwing shape as well. So it's not great, especially for your third baseman. You got to be able to throw the baseball from one end of the diamond to the other, and he hasn't been able to do that. The hope is he's going to be able to do that by opening day. We won't know if that's something that he can do, but in the second to last spring training game that he played, he did hit a triple. So his hitting ability, he's been hitting. That's a position to watch as well. Josh Rojas will likely be your opening day third baseman. Outside of that, J.P. Crawford at shortstop, we don't even need to talk about that. Second base, Jorge Polanco is obviously the plan there. You got to keep him healthy as well. Ty France has come into camp looking great from all intents and purposes. Intents and purposes is actually the saying, I believe. You look at the outfield's interesting because obviously you've got Julio. Mitch wants to play right field as much as he can. And then left field's going to be something to watch. Dom Canzone has been somebody that has been picked as someone to watch this offseason in this spring training. So I'm really interested to see that. He did well in some of the most recent spring training games. Luke Raley provides a lot of power. He had a breakout year last year with the Rays. Taylor Trammell is a guy that doesn't have any more minor league options. So if he doesn't end up making camp, making the team to begin the year, he'll have to go on waivers before going down to AAA. So, I mean, there's talent. There's talent with the outfield. And then you've got the super utility players like Sam Haggerty and like Dylan Moore. I don't imagine any of those guys take a starting spot, but it's just interesting with this spring training that there isn't a lot of competition, a lot of position battles, because this is normally what happens during spring training. You've likely got your opening day lineup set. There's just a few things, third base, and maybe backup catcher that you're going to be looking at as well. So I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see a little bit more tomorrow with the split squad game, and even then with split squad, you only get to see obviously a split of the roster. But if this Mariners team is healthy, I am encouraged at what's going to be able to happen. I know that there's been talks leading into spring training that if the Mariners see something, an opportunity to add to this roster, then they will. But I just don't see it happening. I'd bet against it.
So with that sort of recap there of what's going on with the Mariners in spring training, what to look for, we do have some updates. So we go to the show itself here, because you saw backlots me talking about that. We'll go into some of the games. Again, I mentioned it last week, you only take so much stock in the games that the Mariners play in spring training. You're really looking at some of the players and their individual performances, usually how playoff positions shake out, but obviously not so much the case here. Looking at the first 4 games of the past week here, February 26th at the Cincinnati Reds was a split squad game, a 2-1 win. So far, it's the only win of spring training for the Mariners. Our player of the game was relief pitcher Reed Van Scooter. He isn't normally a relief pitcher, but with spring training, you're trying to get a bunch of pitchers in. He pitched in relief in this game. 2 innings pitched, 1 hit allowed, and 4 strikeouts on the game, which was pretty nice to see in those 2 innings of work. Then February 27th at the San Francisco Giants, a 10-10 tie. Yes, a tie. Our player of the game, shortstop Ryan Bliss, 3 hits, 2 runs, 1 RBI. Bliss is a guy that's going to be really interesting. Came over in that trade from the Diamondbacks, has that plus speed, has some hitting ability, but obviously folks are looking at his defense to improve. In AAA Tacoma this year, February 28th versus the Kansas City Royals, a 7-9 loss. Our player of the game, left fielder Taylor Trammell, 2 hits, 1 run, and 1 RBI. Another guy that's looking to make a name for himself and might find himself in AAA Tacoma. He doesn't have any minor league options left, so if he doesn't break camp with the big league club, he's going to have to go through waivers in order to get down to AAA, and I highly doubt he clears waivers, personally. So then February 29th versus the Chicago White Sox was a 5-6 loss. It was a split squad game as well. Our player of the game, right fielder Cade Marlowe. Cade, 2 hits, 2 runs, and 1 RBI. Cade, another guy who's looking to make a name for himself with this Mariners team in that crowded outfield. He had a nice game, and he's had a nice spring training so far. We go to the final 3 games of the past week for spring training. March 1st at the Colorado Rockies, a 9-10 loss. Our player of the game, third baseman Josh Rojas, 2 hits, 1 run, and 3 RBIs. Rojas played second base after being acquired by the Mariners this past year around the trade deadline. But, him and Luis Urias are 2 of the guys who are battling for that third base spot. Rojas in this game, 2 hits, 1 run, and 3 RBI, which included a homer as well. March 2nd versus the Oakland Athletics was an 8-12 loss. Our player of the game, third baseman Brian Anderson. 1 hit and 3 RBIs. Anderson is the guy we talked about last week. Maybe he's able to put up a fight in that third base competition. When you hit home runs, that certainly helps. So then to wrap us up, March 3rd at the San Diego Padres was a 4-12 loss. Our player of the game, once again, Cade Marlowe in center field. This time, 1 hit, 1 run, and 2 RBIs. So that's what we've got for those games. I mean, again, like I've said with the Mariners, we're not really looking at too much with these spring training games. You're looking at the individual efforts. You're looking at guys to get better. That's why I'm more focused on the team news side of things. So with the banner you see, we will throw it over to something pretty important where we talked about the Matt Brash updates that we got this past week. And I'll throw it to Backlots Me once again.
So some of the major news regarding the Mariners this past week was Matt Brash. Everybody was really worried about Matt Brash. He had to get some tests done. Some of the wording from Scott Service was pretty vague, that we'd hear about him in a few days. And usually with that territory comes some sort of major long-term injury. Now, what we learned a few days ago was that Brash was dealing with elbow inflammation that was similar to some previous tests that had happened with him in the past. Now, he won't be ready to go for opening day. That's highly unlikely because he will likely be on the injured list to start the year. He'll likely need a full, I'm saying likely a lot, he'll need a full spring training to build up, get his arm going. The Mariners going to be really cautious with him just because of how important he was. He was one of the highest used relievers last year in all of Major League Baseball. So expect the Mariners to be cautious with Matt Brash, and with good reason, right? I mean, we've all seen how important Matt Brash has been to this bullpen, but all in all, this is good news, just considering how troublesome some of the wording that you could have taken from Scott Service was. There was a lot of thought that he might get shut down for the year. Some experts thought that this was going to take him out for a long time. At the end of the day, if Matt Brash is going to be fine for most of the season as opposed to just opening day, I'm fine with that, right? So that was a little bit concerning, but it's still big news. So don't expect him to, and especially with Gregory Santos also coming into camp, having dealt with an injury that he was working on throughout the course of the offseason as well. It was starting to look not great. But again, thankfully, with Matt Brash, his elbow inflammation, it's a short-term stinger of all things, not for all of all things, but thankfully, again, it's not something that should hold him out for a long point of the upcoming MLB season. So that's what we've got with Matt Brash.
All right, so you got the news on Brash there. We do have a few other things. On February 26th, it was announced that Julio Rodriguez was dealing with some hand inflammation. He wasn't concerned about it. He was able to make his spring training debut a few days later. It was just he'd been swinging the bat a lot. He didn't have his own bats that he normally works with. And because of the different knobs, his hands were not really feeling it. So luckily, that's not something to be concerned about. Also, speaking of Luis Urias, on March 1st, he had started throwing in infield drills, and he will be limited in doing so. But the hope is that he can be ready to go by opening day on March 28th. And some other team-related news, sort of tidbits here. On the 27th, the Mariners experimented with the 27th and the 28th. They did this. They experimented with a new streaming option to broadcast Cactus League games, which was nice. They only tried it for 2 games, with a bunch of the spring training games coming up not being broadcast on Root Sports. The fans are really hoping that they bring this back, and I think it'd be great. I mean, it was really simple. It had a few different camera angles. It had a score bug, and it had the radio broadcast. That's all you really need. I mean, especially for spring, I more than, and they included the hydro races. Like, what else? What else could you ask for? So I hope that comes back, but we'll end up seeing it. Also, on February 28th, we got the news Colt Emerson added 20 pounds in the offseason, one of the 3 Mariners draft picks from this past year's draft, in the first round. That is one of those 3 draft picks in the first round. He's been feeling more explosive and been hitting the ball further, so that's exciting for one of the Mariners prospects. On the 29th, Bryce Miller will be limited in spring and early into the year in order to protect his forearm and elbow. So watch for Bryce to be limited early on. And then on the 2nd and the 3rd, we have a total of 15 players that were reassigned to minor league camp. None of these guys I really thought were going to be going to the big league club or breaking camp. And again, like I talked about on the backlots, this year's roster and this starting lineup is mostly set. It's just kind of about some things here and there that the team will have to decide. So those players, right-handed pitchers Corey Abbott, Heath Hembry, Jimmy Joyce, Sean Poppin, and Travis Kuhn. Left-handed pitcher Holden Laws. Infielders Rangel Revelo, Caden Polkovich, Brock Roden, Leo Rivas, and Hogan Windish. Catchers Jake Anchia and Matt Scheffler, as well as outfielders Spencer Packard and Alberto Rodriguez. So that will wrap up our team news bit of things, and normally this would wrap up our Mariners, but instead we've got something else to show you. So we will go into that right about here.
So we had something special here. It is technically, by the time you're seeing this, it is Monday. And Monday was an off day for the Mariners. They didn't have any games to play. The Peoria Sports Complex was busy because the Padres were playing, and it's a shared facility. But Liv Lyons, who's behind the camera right now in two different senses, and I met Harry Ford. It's the second time that we've had Harry do an interview on Circling Seattle Sports platforms. But Harry talked a little bit about he was catching for George Kirby here on this lot, actually. George Kirby and his intensity working with Cal Raleigh throughout spring training. Some of the other younger draft picks in the recent drafts that weren't part of Harry's draft with Ty Pete, Colt Emerson, guys like that. And about his personal growth, both as a man and as a player, since being drafted by the Mariners. So here is that. So, Harry Ford, I just wanted, you were working with George Kirby back there. I just want to ask what it's like working with him, because we hear a lot about how intense the guy is, and obviously, an excellent pitcher, but what's your experience been like with George?
Working with George, he's really fun to catch. He can throw all his pitches whenever he wants to, wherever he wants to, and he's a great competitor out there. He's a battler. So it's always fun getting to catch someone as skilled and as competitive as he is.
You guys had a really strong year last year. People have been really excited with you throwing guys out from your knees this spring. How have you felt this past year and coming into this year, just with your growth and trying to excel, since being drafted by the Mariners?
Sorry, can you say it?
Oh yeah, you had a good year last year with the Sox. There was a playoff run, which I know you guys wanted to go further. And then this spring training, people have been excited by it, throwing guys out from your knees, that sort of thing. How have you really seen your own growth, since being drafted by the Mariners?
I've grown in all areas, grown as a player, grown as a man, and every day I'm learning something new. Getting to be around all the other guys that we have here has helped a bunch, and they teach me something every day. And so I've been growing a lot in all areas.
What have you seen? Because I just saw you guys were with Ty Pete as well, amongst a few other guys. A lot of folks are excited by that draft class as well, with Colt Emerson and Johnny Farmello. Do you have any interaction with some of those guys? Obviously with spring, I'm sure you do.
Yeah. I see him around. We have a Bible study going on, and
oh, really?
Johnny and Colt were there last night, so I went out to talk to them briefly. I see them around here and there. Don't always have time to talk, but yeah, they're good guys.
Then just to kind of start wrapping you up here, I know, spring, it brings all the guys together from the organization. How much interaction have you had with Cal, and what have you been able to, moments share with him, maybe learn from him, or just kind of be around the guy?
Yeah, I do all my stuff with Cal. Catching wise, I'm always around him when he's catching, and in the locker room and stuff. He's taught me a lot just about how to be what it means to be a catcher, what it means to try to be a leader, and he does the best by just doing it and showing the guys how it's done. So being around him is I'm lucky to be able to have that.
And then just to close you out here, you before we started, you talked about seeing you at the ballpark with the Mariners, and then obviously you spent the season with the Aqua Sox. What kind of sense have you gotten about Mariners fans? Because it's a big fan base. People get really excited, especially about some of the prospects as well. What has your interactions been like, and your thoughts on Mariners fans as well?
Well, the fans, they bring the energy every day. It's amazing getting to just see them in spring training, and even at just the Aqua Sox games, and on TV whenever we see the Mariners games. It's just a really amazing fan base who always supports the players and wants a championship to be brought. And they're really electric, really great people.
So after hearing from myself and Harry, we go over here to wrap up this Mariners segment. We've got 24 days from the time that this video goes out. It'll be 23 by Tuesday until Mariners opening day. So The next, what is this, 7 games or so? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. The Mariners will play 7 games starting on March 5th. It's a split squad day. On the road, they'll play the Cleveland Guardians at 12:05. At home at Peoria Sports Complex, where Liv and myself will be. March 5th versus the Texas Rangers at 12:10. March 6th at the Kansas City Royals, 12:05. March 7th versus the Los Angeles Angels at 12:10. March 8th is a split squad game at the Chicago Cubs at 12:05. Then wrapping up March 9th at the Milwaukee Brewers is a 12:10 start. And then March 10th versus the San Francisco Giants is a 1:10 p.m. Pacific time start.